Hi, my name is Conrad, and today I want to talk about the things that Jesus changed, about the way I lived my life. Let's start by talking about who I was before I met Jesus. Yeah, I was merely an alcoholic, not a full blown alcoholic, but let's say on New Year I could drink a whole bottle of whiskey. I fell into the snow and was totally gone. And I was also a very depressed man. I was depressed since early childhood. And I didn't even know what depression was. I've found out much later in life. And I never talked about my depressions with anybody in the first, let's say, 25 years. Nobody gave a damn. They always said, well, you don't have any reasons to be depressed. That's how people are. I believed in God and Jesus, but I didn't believe that God was a loving God. He had love, but he didn't have love for me. That's how twisted my thinking was. Twisted by Satan, twisted by my own pain. I knew that there would be change. And I also knew that I wanted to have a real relationship with Jesus. Not that fake stuff that they show on TV, not the fake stuff they talk about in church. I knew that God can talk to people. I knew that you can have a real relationship with Jesus. And I wanted exactly that relationship. But I talked to him when I started to become a born-again Christian. And I immediately knew that I had to stop drinking. Some people say, or some Christians say, but you can have a glass of wine in the evening. But I knew for me, I immediately knew that God wanted me to stop drinking for good. Not a drop of alcohol. He gave me that power and the authority to do that. Like I said, I became a born-again Christian in 2014, and I didn't have one drop of alcohol for almost 10 years now. So I never looked back. The second thing, or second change, I didn't realize at first was the stuff about my depressions. But after a few months, I realized, wait a minute. Because my depressions were like a cycle. 2 weeks depressed, 2 weeks normal. 2 weeks depressed, 2 weeks normal. That kind of cycle. But I realized the depression cycle wasn't there anymore. There were times where I felt sad, but the depressions were gone. The first changes that Jesus made happen in my life. And I started to read the Bible. My father got sick, like I told you in the last video. My father had a stroke. Shortly after I became a born-again Christian, my father got sick. And the doctor said he had diabetes in his legs. His legs were all completely full of with wounds, and he already had maggots on his legs. The doctor said we have to cut his legs off, maybe. But I waited for hours in the hospital, and the doctors, I didn't know what they did to him, but I guess they did something about the maggots. They washed him and examined him, and I was sitting in the waiting room. I was reading my Bible. I was reading and reading and reading. And after 2 hours, I could finally see my father, and I realized, after I have felt forgiveness in my heart for my father, we connected, because he saw that I was there for him. Whenever he fell out of his wheelchair, I picked him up. I was never able to give a hug to my parents. They never gave us a hug, and they never told us, "I love you," or something like that. I didn't grow up like this, because my father was a very strong man, but very tough man, and they never said something like "we love you" or something like that. And my mother didn't have time to tell us that she loved us, because she had to raise 9 kids. So they raised us without the stuff you see in movies. "I love you, kid. Let's give you a hug. Let's hug." We didn't know that. But when my father was sick, that changed. And I remember when I was young, I couldn't give him a hug. I felt uncomfortable. Now that I was a born-again Christian, I could hug him, give him a hug, and I loved to give him a hug. Same with my mother. And he never said anything good about me. When I was a kid, I was born prematurely. I was born with asthma, and I was skinny. I was a weak, skinny kid, and I was always sick. And my father said, "Oh no, he's not gonna achieve anything." And whatever I did in my life, he always said, "No, no, you can't do that. You're too sick, you're too small, you're too skinny. We have to take care." And but later on, I remember watching the Rocky movie, Rocky 1, at age 11, when I started to work out and started to run, and my asthma was gone, and I wasn't this skinny little kid anymore. But still, my father always said, "Oh, you can't, you're not gonna achieve anything. Oh no, that's not for you." But now that he was totally sick, and he saw that I could lift him when he fell on the ground, my father was about 95 kilos, and nobody could lift him, but I could lift him and put him in his wheelchair. And I remember the doctor came back with him in his wheelchair, and my father, he pointed at me and said to the doctor, that is my son." And it was the first time that my father was proud of me. It was the first time that he showed that he was proud of me. 2 weeks after that, he was dead. He died in the hospital. I was the last one that visited him, and it was a very sad day. he was all out of breath. It was very heavy breathing, and the doctor said, yeah, it's gonna be okay. He'll be okay. And I didn't have much time at that day. I was jogging to the hospital out of time. I had to go. And my father said, do you already have to leave? I said, yes, Father, I have so much to do. And that was the last time I saw him. And I remember lying in bed that night, and I was reading the Bible, and it was a passage about everything has its time. In that night, my mother called me on my cell phone and said, he died, he just died. And I put my clothes on and went to my mom. And yeah, I remember that I thought at that time, if Jesus hadn't already pulled me, I would have bought a huge bottle of whiskey and knocked me off. But I didn't, because I knew I had responsibility. I had to be strong for my mom, and I had to be strong for the rest of the family. Although I was the youngest of the boys, I learned to take responsibility now that my dad was gone. It was very sad because I didn't have the time to talk about Jesus. I would have loved to talk about Jesus with my father, but it all happened too fast. I remember I wanted to give him a Bible, and he said, no, I don't want a Bible, because he had very bad experience with the Catholic Church. Yeah, it's sad. If I knew that we didn't have the time, I would have loved to talk about my newfound love for Jesus. I would have loved to talk about that with my father. But you see, my walk with Jesus started with that already, the first test. But I tried to keep strong, and that's where the journey began. So I want to stop for today. It was a crazy ride. But it's worth it. It still is. Have a blessed day. See you soon.